Citizens of the universe, it is time for episode 24 of the Neutralins podcast. Another week is in the rearview mirror, and honestly, this time I just kind of want to rant about sports for the majority of this episode. So, sorry if you're not a sports fan. I'll try to make it still understandable for most of you. I'm just going to be talking about not like specifics, hopefully. So yeah, let's get into it. And before we begin, if you have any questions you want answered or topics you want to be discussed, hit me up at NeutralinPod on all socials. I'll get to it in a future episode. So, first thing I do want to talk about is what is the actual difference between good players and professional players? And I think most people know the answer. It's fundamentals, but they don't know why. Because everyone wants to do flashy stuff. Everyone wants to see the flashy stuff. And to be honest, almost every good player can do the flashy stuff. Some are more or less consistent, and obviously that can make a difference. But people they think that to be good, you have to be able to do the cool things, but that's not true. It's really about being consistent with your fundamentals, being consistent with the basics. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the times when I see different competitions or different sports, the difference between those who win and those who lose is the basics. Are you able to hit your shots? Are you able to complete passes? Are you able to block correctly? Are you able to dribble correctly? So a lot of these things where people, if they don't lose control of the ball, or if they don't lose control of their fundamentals, that's how they win. Like in tennis, right? If you're constantly hitting the ball outside of the lines, well, then you're not going to get very many points. So that becomes a huge killer for a lot of people is the fact that they self-inflict mistakes. So what I've really seen is that most professional players get to that pro level because of their fundamentals. It's not really because they're insanely talented or because they're so much better than other people or they can do so many flashy things. It's because they have a system and they have really, really good fundamentals, and they lean on those basics and they just do better than other people. And while everyone else is making mistakes, they don't self-inflict harm. If we look at the 2024 Yankees and what the scouting report for the Dodgers said on them for the World Series was the Yankees are talent over fundamentals, and if you put the ball in play, they will self-inflict harm. And the essence of that was the Yankees emphasize hitting the home runs and making the big plays. But if we just play baseball and make them have to make routine plays over and over again, they're going to mess up and give us a chance, is what the Dodgers are saying. And it actually almost perfectly played out in Game 5. We saw that crazy comeback from the Dodgers because of all the Yankees' mistakes. So, you saw, that was a perfect example of the Dodgers just didn't mess up the simple stuff. They forced the Yankees to consistently make simple plays, but they couldn't, and they ended up losing that game that they really should have won because Garrett Cole was dominating. Their starting pitcher was dominating, and yet they gave up so many runs in spite of Cole pitching well because the defense couldn't stop anything. They were dropping plays, they were missing throws. It was awful. And just beyond that also is if you have a really solid foundation for fundamentals, you give yourself a better platform to be able to do harder things, because a lot of harder things and more advanced things and the flashy things are based on your ability to hit the fundamentals. For example, we all watch Caleb Williams in this past season of the NFL, make some crazy throws. And how do we hit those throws consistently? Well, Caleb has a really good arm, yes, but he also has really good throwing mechanics, which means that his fundamentals when it comes to throwing make sure that he is accurate even when he's out of the pocket, falling down, running backwards, off balance, whatever it may be. His throwing mechanics and his understanding of the fundamentals of throwing are so good that it allows him to stay consistent and deliver the ball accurately despite all the other situations. Right. So you see players like that, like a Josh Allen, like a Patrick Mahomes, like a Lamar Jackson, right? How are they able to deliver such ridiculous, Drake May, how are they able to deliver such ridiculous throws? And it's because they have such good fundamentals that it allows them to stay consistent, that those passes aren't going wild, or they aren't such a low opportunity shot. But for them, they can hit it a lot more often, right? So if they have like a 30% chance to hit a throw, but their fundamentals are 90%, well, then they're going to hit 27% of the time, right? Or it's probably going to be like less because of like how exponential. Anyway, but if your fundamentals are 99%, then your percentage of that 30% goes up, and so you're able to hit those plays a lot more. So, or it's actually more like, if your fundamentals are 90%, and yet there's like 6 different things, then 90 times 90 times like, or 0.9 times 0.9 times 0.9, like, right? So that's kind of where you see those take effect. And just in general, like, playing fundamentally sound is how you force your opponent to not make mistakes. Because if you're not making mistakes, no one can beat you. You don't have to do anything crazy. You just have to not make mistakes. As long as your opponent's making mistakes. If they aren't making mistakes, you have to play insane to beat them. But you won't if you're going to mess up the simple stuff. You're going to give them too many opportunities where if they're not going to make too many huge mistakes, they're going to beat you. And you saw it with like the Patriots in the Tom Brady, Bill Belichick dynasty, where a lot of people call them boring because they would just take the simple plays. They would keep making simple plays and they would march down the field and score because it was so hard to make them make a mistake that like you really had to play well to stop them and like not give them free opportunities. Because if you gave them a couple free opportunities, even if you could play insane and make great plays over them, if you gave them a couple extra opportunities, they would still find a way to beat you because they didn't make many mistakes in the first place. Their fundamentals are so good. Like, where a lot of teams, their fundamentals are breaking down at the end of the year, and you see them kind of get sloppy with tackling or with blocking or just like fundamental football. And the Patriots always maintain like great tackling in their defense and great blocking in their offense and like route running and things like that, because they're always drilled on their fundamentals and making sure those, even in the biggest moments, wouldn't be forgotten. And so that's how they kept beating teams. So yeah, okay. Speaking of like boring games, though, I also do feel like this is something else I wanted to talk about. Was I feel like a lot of people dislike defensive games because, and I mean I get it, because from a fan's perspective, especially a casual fan, you're there to see the highlights. You're there to see the crazy plays, right? You're there to have a good time. And you want to see high stakes plays, high stakes matchups, and you want to see everything on the line, a huge play at the end of the game. Those are exciting. Those are very, very exciting. And when there's not a lot of scoring opportunities, a lot of people don't find it exciting. They're like, well, that was a pretty boring game. Like Super Bowl 53, where everyone was saying that was a pretty boring game. We saw, what was it, like 13-3? Patriots Rams, 2 extremely high profile offenses, and yet they couldn't get it going. And people were calling that really boring because there was nothing offensively highlight worthy for a long time. And you compare it to some of the other games that are like 45-42, or like if the 54-51 Rams Chiefs game, I think from earlier that season, people were saying that's one of the best games ever because there were so many like offensive highlights and crazy plays. And I think from a fan's perspective, those kinds of things can make a good or bad game. But for someone who, like, I like to analyze more, I like to kind of really dig deeper into why are certain teams winning or losing. And I'm not like a football nerd by any means. I don't really know too much. But I know enough to kind of understand like what the defense is trying to do, what the offense is trying to do. And I feel like a lot of people don't really see that. They don't see like, oh my God, that was a crazy play from the corner to reach in and knock the ball out. Otherwise it would have been a catch. Like people just see that as like, oh, he should have caught that. Or like, okay, he broke up the play. And it's not something like crazy. Or even like a small adjustment, right? Like a run play where the running back cuts back for an extra 3 yards. And it gets them a 3rd and short, like a 3rd and 2 versus like a 3rd and 6. And those things can make a difference. And that's where you see like really good players. They can make those plays, but no one finds that exciting, right? Because it's not some explosive play. It's not something crazy that you don't see too often. But like not everyone understands the game or wants to understand the game on that level. And I get it, but it's just, it's just kind of funny to me when I see people complaining about games because they're like, oh my God, this game is so boring. But it's there's a chess match going on out there. And I think for a lot of like really big football fans who weren't like just complete Patriots haters, that Super Bowl 53 was probably very interesting because there's a lot of stuff going on in that game and a lot of adjustments trying to be made to break through the defenses. And it did ultimately come in the fourth quarter. The Patriots got a touchdown, but yeah, I think a lot of people just saw punt, and thought it was boring. No one's moving the ball, but it's not really what happened. You know, people watch for the excitement. People watch for the huge moments, but yeah, and then they want to turn around and call the teams that just play fundamentally sound boring, right? Like going back to that point, they think it just kills the excitement. I guarantee you, all those players, they don't care in the slightest, right? They want to win the games. So if that means playing boring, if that means shutting you down, like a lot of the teams that people call boring, like the tush push right now in football, everyone's saying like, oh, this is really boring, but the Eagles defended it for a while. It's like, well, it's a good play. You want to call it boring? Well, it's helping us win. So I guarantee you none of them cared, right? And if other teams could do it too, I don't think any of them would care. So yeah, I just wanted to offer my perspective on those things. So yeah, let's get to the other actual topic I did want to discuss in this episode, which is how do I implement the feedback that I've been given? And to be honest, I feel like a lot of people kind of misunderstand this because they either take it too far or they don't go far enough at all. In the sense that, like, I think most people, if they get feedback, they try and implement it, or they get feedback and they just don't listen to it, right? And obviously, like, most people will listen to some and not listen to others, but like, how do you do that? And the truth is, like, you don't have to listen to about 90%. I mean, you should listen, but you don't have to like follow through with most of the feedback you get, especially if it's more of a creative thing rather than a technical thing. If it's more of a technical thing, like, hey, this is probably more optimal, maybe you should listen. But it's really about doing your due diligence to analyze the feedback you've been given. Like, what do they tell you, and what kind of perspective does it bring? Like, for example, if someone were to criticize this podcast and say, I think you're boring, right? Okay, well, they didn't offer much in terms of why I'm boring, so I'm probably just going to ignore it, but I will keep in mind that someone thinks I'm boring, so okay, what am I doing that's boring, you know? Is it someone who's more casual to podcasts, or are they more of a professional creator? Because those guys can offer different insights, but it also means like you shouldn't not listen to casual viewers or casual listeners or casual to whatever it is. Like if you're doing music and some casual listener just tells you like, oh, I think you could improve this part of the melody because it sort of feels like it doesn't fit. And you can't just sit there and be like, okay, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know music, but that's most listeners. So if he feels that, then maybe there's something there. And you have to kind of analyze, is it just something that he feels himself, like subjectively, or is there actually something there that could be a broader issue? And, you really have to think about it and try and approach it objectively and see if there's something else there. And oftentimes I found that the problem doesn't really lie where people say the problem is. Like if someone says your melody sounds off or it doesn't really sound like it fits, the problem could be the harmony. The problem could be the instrument. The problem could be a lot of other things that are not the melody. Or like, again, if someone called me boring, which I'm sure there are people who think I'm boring, but why do they think that? Do they think that, or rather, like, why is that coming across as boring to them? Is it just a purely they don't like my style kind of thing? Am I too non-expressive? I've been told I'm pretty monotone. Or is there something else to it, right? Like maybe it's the topics. Maybe it's my perspective on the topics. They don't really like that. Maybe it's the energy of my voice. Maybe it's the tonality of my voice. Maybe it's my pacing. They don't like if I'm too fast or too slow, and they can't really, like follow it well or something. So there's a lot of reasons that it could be, or maybe it's just like the words I say, right? The actual words. So there's a lot of ways that you can kind of like explore and see if there's something there. And sometimes you'll just disagree. Sometimes you'll just feel like, no, I don't think this guy is saying that, or more like, I mean, of course, most people are saying in your best interest, but I don't think I agree with him. I think that we have two different views, especially in a creative environment. Okay, if you guys have two different views and this is how you like it, then by all means stick to what you're doing. You know, feedback isn't meant to be a you have to follow it or you're gonna suck kind of thing. It's really just a range of opinions that you have to sort through and figure out, what do I actually have to listen to, and is there something there, or like a broader issue, or is it just sort of someone's opinion? And if it's someone's like very narrow opinion, then it's not as important as someone's opinion that could be attributed to a broader thing, right? And you just have to figure that out. You figure out like what you like, what you don't, and decide if it's worth doing something about, or if you disagree. So yeah. All right, I think I'll leave it there. And as always, thank you guys for listening, and I will see you next week.